Let's go.
Welcome to Don Cherry's Grapevine podcast, voted by Apple the biggest, best Canadian podcast of 2020. We're quite proud of that. So, Dad, a lot to get to, and I guess the first thing we got to talk about, we're here with Cindy and Dell, and Dad and I, is the World Juniors.
You know, I feel so bad they lost. I feel bad they had that kid on at the end. I never forgot, and the kid was crying, and his eyes were all red, and I never forgot the time I was, Calgary was playing Vancouver. Is that right? That's
Yeah.
Yeah. So after the game, if I remember Stan Smale had a breakaway, and Mike Vernon made a terrific save. I was standing right in the corner. He just stuck out his glove, and now for the winning Stanley Cup. He would have won the Stanley Cup. So he loses the game, and Bob McCammon was the coach of Vancouver. So he come on after, pretty good guy. He come on television after, and I'm sitting there. I'm sitting 2 feet from him, and you know it was a small room. And Ron asked him, "How do you feel?" And he's on television, and he turns to me and he says, "How do I feel? I just lost a breakaway away from winning the Stanley Cup, and this guy asked me how I feel." I forget what happened after that. But anyhow,
well, I talk a little bit about that. If you remember correctly, a couple of weeks ago, I said the one thing I don't like about Hockey Canada is that when Canada loses, It's like a rat's deserting a ship.
Well, there was a lot more than one thing you said about Hockey Canada, but that was relative.
And let's march out the crying teenagers. But you know that
you should. First of all, you should never have let that guy out there crying.
No, that was the coach's fault.
Absolutely.
Well, I will tell you one thing. If I was his mother, and watching that, to see my son, to see her son so upset on TV and sort of looking back at that, I mean, someone would have to say, does someone not know not to have that happen? I would be upset if I was his parents.
Because I remember, you got to protect your players a little bit. And, at the end of the day, they interviewed the players in the press room after, and they had composed themselves, and the Canadian kids were okay. But I remember in the Game 7 against Montreal in overtime, the press was going into the dressing room, and you locked the door and said no, and you got what was it you stood on?
It was a milk carton crate that they had the pucks in, and I remember I dumped the thing out and I stood and outside, and I knew all the guys were crying. Imagine men crying inside. I was crying too, and I wouldn't let them in. And then I never forget. I was standing there, and they could hardly wait to get inside. But you have to give the players, I think, to give them 10 minutes. You got to give them more than 10 minutes to compose, especially a game like that. I remember the one guy, French guy, said to me, "No, Mr. Cherry, if you had to put Gilbert in early, you might have won." I was mad because he was right. I remember I said, "Oh, I can't say it." Well, I might as well say it. I said, "Yeah, if my aunt had one, she'd be my uncle." And I never, after it was over, I think my aunt might be ticked off at that. Anyhow, I don't like the guy on there. Anyhow, that was. But
let me ask Tim. I know, Tim, you have. I mean, some of the questions the press asks the players and the coaches is so obvious. But we were talking about, you have a top 3 of some of the stupidest questions that were ever put to guys on TV.
Yeah, I think the first one, and you and I have talked about it over and over. Scott Oak with Redden.
Oh yeah, Mike Redden. Yeah,
Redden. I think it ruined his career. Yeah. And basically, long story short, it was an overtime. It was a 2-on-1. And the guy with the puck, Redden, ran with the guy with the puck, and the guy just sifted it over and walked in.
I forget.
They scored. I forget who they were playing. And it was Redden's fault. I mean, everybody,
but he took a chance.
18,000 people are pointing him, your fault. So Scott Oak interviews him right after the game. Again, still sweat pouring
out on the ice,
and he's sweat pouring off him. And he goes, "Well, if you ran, why did you run at him?" And Redden goes, "I don't know." Well, if you just stayed in the middle, he wouldn't have been able to pass the puck. Yeah, I know. Well, why did you? And he goes, well, I don't know. I haven't looked at. Well, we got it right here. Let's take a look at it. And you can just see him shrinking.
I have to laugh. Scott Oak used to say, "I'm the voice of doom."
Yeah,
because he always used to get the loser all the time. Guys that lose all the time.
And then the second one was I remember Stan Jonathan being interviewed a long time ago, and so the lady went up and says, "We got Stan Jonathan of the 1970 Boston Bruins." She stands there, and he goes, and there was a Bruins reporter, and she goes, "So Stan, you were one of the goons back then." Stan kind of looked there, goes,
"I never had a goon."
Gee, I had 27 goals. I scored a hat trick in the playoffs. He said, he goes, "We didn't have any goons. We all could play."
And they all had 20-some goals.
Yeah. So anyway, that was one that, again, Stan kind of looked. But the worst of all was somebody in New Jersey was interviewing Paul Coffey, and I think he was with Pittsburgh at the time. And the lady said, "Well, we're here with Paul Coffey, the Pittsburgh Penguins," and she goes, "No, Paul, the knock on you is you have no heart."
Yeah.
It was like somebody took a frying pan and hit him over the head. And he looks and he goes, "Geez, I've won 6 Stanley Cups. I'm the leading scoring defenseman in the history of hockey."
She didn't know.
I don't know about that. I just think, but
no heart. Well, I could. Funny you mentioned no heart. I remember when you talk about no heart. I remember I was at an all-star banquet. I didn't guess an all-star. I know what it was we had to go to banquets all the time, or dinners, or whatever you wanted to call them. All the press and everything, and the players and stuff like that. And I was sitting at the table, and it was just so boring. And I used to have a bad habit of playing with the spoons. Like I put one spoon on the other, and I don't know how. I didn't know I was doing it. I remember Bob Cole grabbed it and just fired them down the hall. Everybody looked over. And I remember Orville Tessier at that banquet, or whatever you want to call it. There was a luncheon. I guess it was a luncheon. That's what they call it, a luncheon. And he was nominated for Coach of the Year in Chicago. And he said, and I'm not paying any attention. He said, "Well, I don't think that's a big deal being nominated." He didn't like me, eh? And he says, "Don Cherry won Coach of the Year, so what?" Something like that. And everybody looks at me, and what is I just shrugged my shoulders. So I sat in the weeds, and no sense in saying anything bad about it then. And I remember they were in Edmonton playing Chicago, and they were flying back, and the pilot said, "We're flying over Minneapolis. This is where they have the famous Mayo Clinic, the first heart transplant or something." And he said to one of the reporters, he said, "I think I'll stop and see if they got any heart." Now, you can say anything you want about players are stupid, talent, but don't say they don't have heart. So So I come on and I said, Hockey Night in Canada. I said, they'll lose to Edmonton, will beat them in it. You watch. I said, they'll beat Edmonton, will beat them. And I said, he'll stand, and as they skated off, I said, nobody will shake his hand. And by God, we kept the camera on him. Now the guy shook his hand, because you can say anything you want, as I said before. Anything at all. When you say a guy doesn't have heart, that's the end. And one more thing I got to say. I'm in deep with Orville.
Because you played with him, didn't
I played in junior with him.
Junior. It goes way back.
Yeah. I don't know why. I guess I must have said something. So we're playing. We're playing Cleveland, and Punch Imlach is the coach.
So this is in junior. This is in Springfield, the American.
In Springfield.
League.
It's our first game, very first game, or I think it was around the first game. And Chevets, who used to call him Destroyer. I mean, he could really hit. And he drove him into the board. I remember that play. Drove him into the boards. So it was a good hit. It was a good rough hit. So we're in the dressing room. And Orville starts taking off his equipment. He said, we didn't know him. He just come from the Quebec League. And Punch Imlach was the coach. And we always thought, well, if some guys take off all their equipment and put it back on again.
Like this is between the first and second.
Yeah.
But mostly it's goalies, isn't it, that do that?
Yeah, well, Gary Smith used to do it all the time. There's a goalie. He used to call him Max. But anyhow, he started taking off his equipment. So Punch comes in with 10 minutes to go, before we go on. He said, "What are you doing?" He says, "Hurry up, get your equipment on." He said, "Oh, I'm not playing in this league." was the end of the first period. He's, no, I'm not playing in this league. He says, I'm going back to Quebec League. And he did. And never played in the American League again, I don't think. And Punch looked at us and you see, Punch came from the Quebec League, and he was and Orville could really score. And in the warm-ups, he'd say, I'll hit that post, and he could do it.
So how did Punch Similak come from the Quebec League?
He just come out. He took over for the Boston Bruins. He was in the Boston Bruins organization before he went to Toronto.
Because he took over from your nemesis there, Eddie Shore, right?
Yeah, we took over, and we had a great team. We had a good team. We had one of those goalies. I shouldn't say. Well, anyhow, that if you were losing 3-2, and you tied it up, and he was playing lousy. If you tied it up, he played lousy. If you were losing 4-3, he'd be playing great. If you tied it up, you knew one was going to go in. Anyhow, we're off on an off time. So Punch, I remember. Now we're talking about Punch. We talk about Punch sometime because I get a lot of stories on Punch. So anyhow,
but let's get back. Let's just get back.
Yeah,
to
let's go. Let's get back to the juniors again. I don't know how we get talking there. If they had played the first game, they were up the first game. The Canadian team was up the first game. But they had sort of, let's face it, let's say they had a cakewalk all the way through. And United States, you say what you want about them, they had a team of mean grinders. They knew they didn't have, that game. They knew they had to be 100%, over 100%, or they're not going to be Canadian. And Canada didn't have the jump. Now I know it's hard to believe. An important game, you don't have the jump. You could tell right from the start they didn't have the jump. Tim, you and I talked about it. I can tell, and you could tell if you watch the game a long time, that when the defense pinches, in the first couple of games, our Canadian team was they were pinching behind the net. They were into when a team doesn't pinch, and I could see right off the bat they were a little afraid.
Yeah, they were backing out the first period. They weren't pinching at all.
When you don't pinch, see in the first game they took a chance and they pinched. If you don't pinch, and one thing you're happy about though, I know you're happy about is about what is it, Damien? I think it's Devin Levy. Yeah. He played terrific. You can't play many games on him.
No. Well, as I say, the one thing that really upset me was the way Team Canada handled at the end, letting the kid go on all upset. But the one positive is that Devin Levi, he set records, and he's 6 foot, and hopefully now this will get some of the smaller goalies a chance to play.
And remember the goaltender we watched. And he kept his team in all the time.
Yeah, it was about 2 years ago. We were small goalie, so he would have been 15 years old. He was small. He was like 5'9", which is small now for.
That's true, because one of the announcers, I was watching the game, and the announcer goes, and he is on a smaller side of the goalie, being at 6 foot. I'm going, can you imagine being on the smaller side at being at 6 foot?
Yeah, when they're 6 foot.
Yeah.
Well, he mentioned 6 foot in the same sentence.
They're not really 6 foot. They're about 5'11".
Oh, yeah. I see.
So we watched his goalie, and he played for the Mississauga Rebels, and they weren't a very strong team, and he kept him in every game.
Every game.
They made the playoffs, but this kid was just unbelievable. And talking to the scouts, and the scouts said, I have a tough time selling a 5'9" goalie to my, who's 15. So you can grow to be, you don't have a growth spurt, right? So
we thought he was great, eh?
But if they can stop pucks, what difference does it make with being the size? Look at Potvin and the Cat and all those guys.
Yeah. Well, there's only
Joseph.
Yeah. Well, they're all kind of. I looked at of the goalies that played 20 or more games last year in the NHL. Only 2 were 6 foot. All the rest were 6'2".
You had the smallest goalie of all time, Dad, in Rochester Amherst. Remember Bobby Perreault?
Oh yeah, but
how short was he?
Funny, the goaltenders back in those days, they were always small, but they could move.
Yeah, that's right. That's why you called him the Cat. What was it, Potvin? Because he could move. He was fast and all that.
Mm-hmm. I'm not knocking anybody, but I've always said you never, ever run up a score. Now, what was it, 15-1 or 15 or
16 nothing, I think it was.
16-0.
They beat the poor Germans, Canada.
Yeah, and they were hurt, and guys, they didn't have guys playing and everything. And you run up a score. Remember the time, Tim, Colorado was playing Buffalo, and they beat them 10-3 or 9-3, and I said, that game's going to put us in first spot. And I pointed to a game with about 3 games to go. They're going to play Colorado. And Colorado had a lousy team.
Yeah, so Boston, you were coaching Bruins, and Boston and Buffalo were in a dogfight. I think we ended up beating them by 2 points or something.
Yeah, we just beat them. I said, that's the game that's going to put us in first spot. Sure enough, Colorado walked in and beat them right there, because you don't beat a team 15-0, and you bring the hockey gods. Now, a lot of people, oh, here he is with the hockey gods again. Believe me, it'll catch up with you. The players or somebody will catch up with you. Karma, hockey gods, this is for all the young coaches out there. And I remember when I first come from Colorado, I was watching a game down in, what do they call it now? The one we used to go to all the time, North Sheridan. Anyhow, we used to go to the game. Anyhow, we went to the game, and I was standing there all alone, and I saw juniors. No, they were Bantams, and they were going in. They were beating this team from the United States. They were really hammering, and they were shooting at the pads. So I talked to the coach after. I said, "Did I see something? Did they were shooting at the pads?" He says, "You know what? I didn't have to tell him." And what I'm saying is, when you never ever run up a score. Because when you run up a score, the players always remember and the coach always remember. And I was really surprised that guy said it could have been 20-0.
So is there something?
200-0.
Is there something?
It could have been, I think.
Is there something that the coach can do to not run? He goes, like, a coach could say, well, what am I supposed to do? They shoot the net, shoot at the net, and the puck goes in. What can a coach do not to run up the score?
Well, I remember Brian Kilray. They were when I first took over the Mississauga. He played the defense up in the defense. Remember, he was coaching the Ottawa 67.
Yeah, he put the defense up forward.
And they scored.
Yeah. I can tell you what Brian said also after the game when he came into the office. He says, he said the score. He goes, he told the kids to pass the puck 5 times before they took a shot on net.
Oh, yeah? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he did. That's what he told me.
I think, with the juniors, when they hit the goalpost, killing that penalty.
Karma was coming through.
I thought, this isn't good.
And he hit the pole. Did he hit it 3 times?
He hit the post, yeah. Well, and their goalie.
Anyhow, the kids played good.
Yeah.
I don't think it was the best team. They had all first-round drafters.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder at that, too. I really wonder, did Team Canada wanted to get a team with all first-round picks, to say they had a team with all first-round picks. I wonder that. Because they said, TSM kept saying it could be the greatest junior team.
No, they weren't the great. I heard that. And I wrote down a few things. I write something down. I couldn't remember all these names, so I wrote them down. I said, it is a great team. They should have won if they had been up. I think.
But the greatest team was was 2005.
2005
World Juniors.
I wrote it down. There was Seabrook, played for Chicago. Bell, Shea Weber, Jeff Carter, remember, plays for LA. Crosby, Anthony Stewart, doing a great job on Sportsnet. I think that's Anthony.
Yep.
They had Mike Richards. They had Andrew Ladd. And Corey Perry. Bergeron. I mean, that was the greatest team.
Richards,
Mike Richards, yeah.
And Phaneuf.
I tell you a story about Mike Richards. It's a funny story. And I know we go off on tangents, but if I don't, that Ron told me the story one time that Mike Richards was sitting around. Now, sorry, Mike, but if you're listening, he sort of had little buck teeth. Kind of. Not really buck, but kind of big teeth in the front. And they used to call him the rabbit all the time.
Well, that would indicate it.
So they were having a few beers, and the one guy there, he says, we'll have 4 beers and a box of carrots for that guy. So now he tells me the story. And so he's playing that night against the Leafs, and he scored a goal. And I said, and there's Mike Richards scoring the goal, and he hopped over to the boards. And that's not. Anyhow, I think that was
one of
great.
those, Dad, that's one of those many inside jokes that when people were watching you and Ron,
Well,
and we were sitting at home, and I know the inside joke, and you go, oh boy.
Well,
Yeah. And just before we move on, just one other thing about the World Juniors that we talked about before that I think, and because you always give crap for the refs and the linesmen, but they did a great job.
oh, I'm glad you brought that up.
And they were all Canadian.
They did. That was, you know what? I enjoyed that game. And I don't know, first of all, we'll go with the linesmen.
Yeah.
They put their hand in the air and ping the game, and
When they're facing off, they never throw anybody out.
They didn't.
They put their hands in the air, and they were right back at it again. The game was there was great flow to it. And I think the referees did a super job. Absolutely super. And I'm on the refs all the time. Those games, and no icings, eh?
No.
I loved it.
Well, listen, can I ask a question, though? I was a little confused. I was watching it. How do they determine whether to wave off the icing? Because I'm saying, I wonder if the players know as much as me as that
they know. The players know.
They know?
Here's what happens, Cindy. First of all, let's go the juniors. When the puck is shot down, they'll turn, like say it's going down the right-hand side, they'll turn to their left, away from it, and the NHL guys, they'll call that.
Oh.
But the Canadians in this series, like Europeans, they point at the guy.
See,
They pointed at that guy. You could have got that.
You're not fooling me.
You're not fooling me. I remember one game I kept track of the icings in the National Hockey League last year. There was 21 icings because the guys just turn away. They don't try. And the players know they make fools of the linesmen. And as long as I was there, I'd show it. But in this one, you could not criticize the linesman because they'd point at the guy. He could have had it.
Yeah, they were really
Fantastic.
really good. And they always say, well, why can't, it was great hockey. Well, it was great hockey because the referees just let them play.
And the referees were great. They called every penalty that was called, I agreed with. There wasn't any chintzy penalties. And, the National Hockey League, I don't care if I say it or not, every sport in the world is trying to speed it up. And we do everything in our power to slow it down. I could give you a whole bunch of instances in that. If you wanted to take a goal or an offside, everybody in the building knows it's offside or everybody knows it's a goal. And they're looking at the great big screen up above. And at home, you're looking at a big screen. And you look at the referees, they're looking at a little wee. Anyhow, the National Hockey League.
Well, it'll be interesting. Hockey's coming up. We tape this Sunday morning, so hockey's starting on Wednesday. Let's count how many players get thrown out of the face-off circle.
I think they're going to learn from those guys.
Well, I hope so because you know what the kids they'd fake the kids out like they have to. They'd put their arm up. All the kids would back off, and then they drop.
Well,
the puck,
then they'd argue,
and they wouldn't argue. And then the other thing too is again we talked about it is that. First of all, I was really surprised that the kids never jumped around.
No, never dove. Never dove.
On every team.
Never dove. And after, even when the United States, when they scored the big goal, they never banged the glass and went bananas.
And then, because the referees were so good, they weren't diving. There was no diving. There was no phantom calls because.
Well, when you and I go, we know right off the bat if the guy calls a dive, everybody dives, and the minor midgets. So. Hats off to the officials, and let's not jump on the kids. The kids did a good job. They did their best. They just weren't. Something happened in the first half of that game, and then they hit the goal post. And United States knew they were in a game, and let's not jump on the kids. But I never like all first rounders. I always like role players all the time. And someday I'll tell you about how I did the role players all the time. And Dale Hunter, I think, had role players.
Yeah, well, you look at his team. He got that Akil Thomas, who was, he was a later second round pick, and he scored the gold medal winning goal. And but Hunter knew,
he had Merkley. Eh?
He was the guy. Yeah, he was the guy that hurt that Ryan Merkley was a first round pick. took him into the boards.
Yeah.
But he's just a mean guy to play against, and Hunter wanted that, right?
Yeah.
And he ended up scoring. He didn't play a lot, but when he was out there, he did his job, and then he scored the game-winning goal. So Dad, I think we got to move on to the NHL. Everybody's wanting to hear what's going on. So, but before we go, we just want to thank our sponsors, Spreads.ca. It's a First Nations casino and sportsbook. And for the hockey coming up, they're having a contest called Cherry Picks. So go on Spreads.ca. It's good to the 11th, and you can win up to $5,000. So they're all excited about hockey coming back because tough having a sports book this year without the thing. So
it's a funny thing you're talking there. Basketball looks like it's a practice, and I figured out why. They had all the people sitting around, right next to the court.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us some more. I love, I like this. It's Canadian money and it's Canadian.
They're Canadian. It's tailored towards Canadians because all the other sports bets you got to bet U.S. bucks. You can get killed on
that conversion.
Yeah, conversion rate.
And we're having fun, eh?
So and the good thing is that like if you want to go on the casino side because you have a casino, you can play 50-cent blackjack, which sometimes you just want to play. You don't want to be playing $5 a hand, and then you can bet minimum. You can bet $1 on the games, which is always fun. Like yesterday, I bet on Tampa Bay winning. So Spreads.ca, they have a contest up to January 11th, Cherry Pick. And if you log in and deposit some money, you can win up to $5,000. So Dad, playoffs hockey.
56 games.
56. I'm going to say playoffs. It is like the playoffs.
It's the playoffs, and I have to use the Leafs because I'm here in the Leafs. They play 8 times. They play Canadian teams 8 times. That is, you're going to see McDavid. Be sorry you see him 1 game at a time. 4 home games and 4 on the road. All some double headers. I mean,
well, there's one game. Toronto plays Vancouver 3 games in 5 nights.
I mean, you better be ready. This is the 4-pointers, and this is going to be great hockey.
Yeah. So people don't know what a 4-point game is if you play a team in your division and you win 2 points. If you win, you get 2 points, and then it's the other team that you beat. They lose 2 points that they could have gained. So it's like in Jeopardy when one person gets it wrong and the other person gets it right. If it's $1,000, there's a $2,000 swing, right?
That kills you.
So that and so really, like if you look at that's if let's say Vancouver sweeps Toronto, that there's 6 points behind.
Can I ask a question? Like, Dad, how is this going to affect like the older veterans that are playing that many games? Like, it's got to be tough on the older players.
Well, you play 4 games in a week. 4 games a week, boy.
That's got to be tough on some of them.
There won't be many practices, I'll tell you that.
Well, but that, when I was reading the stuff on Chara leaving, one of the concerns they said the Bruins management had was that he wasn't going to be able to keep up with the pace.
This guy, what do you call those guys that vegan?
He's a vegan. He's more than a vegetarian. I think he's a vegan.
He's a vegan.
He's
yeah.
a vegan.
What's a vegan?
Well, that's the next step. Even more strict. It's stricter than a vegetarian. No dairy, no cheese, no anything. Like they're really strict.
No sugar. He doesn't
sugar.
Eat,
Yeah.
Sugar.
He doesn't eat any sugar.
Why? Yeah.
It's healthier, Dad. Look at he's in his 40s. He's still working. It's healthier for you. It's better for the environment. Don't get me going on the vegetarian thing.
But you had John Rattel, who was when he came was in the twilight. So how did you manage him playing 82 games?
It's a funny thing. I knew New York Rangers. Their policy was everybody on the ice every day. Even going back to Guelph, everybody that was their policy. Everybody on the ice every day. So Jean Rattel, he was thin as a rail. I mean, he just thin as a rail.
So how old would he have been when he came to Boston? He would have been
in his 30s.
In his 30s, yeah.
Yeah, and he had a bad back. His back was so bad that when we went on the road, we had to have they phoned ahead and said they had to have a board on his bed. And he was a pro golfer, eh?
Isn't golf bad for your back?
Well, he couldn't. He had to give up golf because
I still have he gave me a sand wedge. I still have it. I still use it.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
I don't know if you're as good as him though.
No. He gave me a couple lessons. And
he was a semi-pro. So he had to give that up. He had to give everything up. So one day, I said, I got to get this guy off the ice because he worked hard on the ice. He couldn't believe it. So I said, we played Sunday, and I said, I don't want you on the ice till we had an optional, and then Tuesday we had a real tough one. So I said to him, I don't want you being around here till Wednesday. So we practiced, and no, Donnie, I practice every day, and and he's going on. What a great guy he was. And I said, John, and sure enough, he ended up, he was there for the optional practice, and he was there, and you couldn't keep him off the ice. So finally, I said in front of the guys, and when you said in front of the guys, it's sort of, I said, John, I don't want you here till Wednesday, and I, and if you're here, and all that stuff. So he come in after that. He said, Donnie, what am I going to do? What will the manager say? What will the players say? What will the and I said, don't worry about the players. They know what I'm doing. The press, and I said, if you're not here Monday and Tuesday, when they come in there, and I'll just say he had the flu. So he didn't want it. So, and then at the end, he was open. He was asking to get on. He was a super guy, Jean Rattel. And I remember and when you fly, you fly first class. The coach always gets first class. So they had,
Because back then, you guys, a lot of people wouldn't realize you used to fly commercial.
Well, the first year we didn't.
First year you didn't.
And the first year we took charters all the time, and it was just terrible. The guys that landed, they'd all. So anyhow, the next year they hated the club, I guess, and we had to fly commercial, and it was the best thing that ever happened because we were all together. So what?
Well, you were saying that you used to in commercial. You used to sit. Coach and Harry used to sit first class.
No, Harry didn't fly the night of the
so
game.
you were sitting in first class.
All by yourself because you had no assistant coach.
I didn't mind being by myself. I used to read, but they used to have liqueurs and all that stuff and a big meal, and I never had big meals. I wouldn't eat.
There's nothing more. It is aggravating. Imagine, folks, he always first class, never ate a meal, didn't take advantage of the free liquor, anything.
Yeah, it was when Ron and I would fly first class. We did once in a while we did most of the time.
Yeah,
and they'd have a big meal with no thanks. And the stewardess and the steward, they couldn't understand it, how anybody would pay money. And we didn't, the CBC or Hockey Night in Canada play. So anyhow, I told John, I said, John, I want you. I knew he liked liqueur, and he was a class guy, and he'd have the meal and all that big meal. So I said, I want you to sit first class. Oh no, Donnie, I can't sit. And he and guys really loved him, because he was the oldest guy in the club, and I used to say, no, I want you up there. I said, I have to talk to Bobby Schmatz or somebody like that. And so I remember after about the third time, he said, "Are you going to sit first class?"
That's a good. Wasn't it him that taught you and I? Not that I ever sat in first class, about the napkin in your tie?
Oh no, that was Carl Vodney.
Oh, French again. Knows what's
guy.
going on.
I always hung around with the French guys.
I know the irony of life that you're anti-French and your two closest friends were Rattel and Vadney. But tell them that story
and
about
Rene Robert
and Rene, and Delorme and all those guys.
I remember. This is a funny story. I used, I didn't know. So I go on Air Canada, and maybe a lot of people don't know.
I bet you a lot of people don't know this.
So I had a nice tie, so I used to take my serviette or whatever you call it, and I used to shove it down the front. And one day he said, Donnie, and I'll never forget, he said, there's a little hole. And he says, it's to put your butting on the top of your shirts.
For the napkin. The napkin has a hole in it.
And
and you hook your button through
and if
it.
you look, it's still there. And I felt like a real punker. I guess I was.
You were telling me that story. I said, gee, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. Anyhow.
So let's get back to, we're going to say, well, I think most of the Canadians were interested in the Canadian division. So the question is, Dad.
Wait a minute. Let me talk about it first. I don't know. We used to, like, what you used to do, what they want to do is to save, they save money. Like, say you go, you pay double headers and stuff like that. Because, well,
they don't want them traveling as much.
They don't want to travel, and they save money on travel, and And you know, the one thing I don't like is that they're going to have about 26 players. They're going to have about 6 players hanging around. And you know, it's a funny thing. The players that don't play, they bond together, and they're always together all the time. And I never liked players. And I remember when I coached the Boston Bruins, when we get a guy get hurt, I wouldn't bring a guy up. Someday I'm going to talk about that. And I don't, boy, how they ever get 26 guys is beyond me.
Yeah, well, the thing is, they don't want to bring guys up like they're all going to be not in a bubble, but they're all going to be tested every day. So they can't bring guys up from the American League because they don't know if they've been tested and all that. So that's why there's 26 players. They can dress 20 some. So there's like 4 players are like.
So would they be called Black Aces or not?
They're the Black Aces.
They call them the Taxi Squad now.
Oh,
but
is
they're
that?
but they're Black Aces.
Yes. Okay.
You know, when Ron and I used to go to the game, morning skates, and in the finals, and this is a true story. Well, it happens all the time. There'd be one game left, and now the assistant coaches have to have they have to.
So they got the Black
Aces are on the ice. So we used to stay after and watch. With one game to go, they do drills. You know, and the guys they were looking up at me,
Really?
shaking my head, and you know the goaltenders hated doing. I mean, one game to go. It was just.
You don't know what you're doing by then, like pack it in, right?
Well, they had to do, and you know, I remember I had 6 guys. No, I think I had about 4 guys left over. And they were mostly Tommy Songen, Bill Bennett, and anyhow, they were all big guys. And I used to stay on the ice, and the assistant, now the head coach, never with the Black Aces. And I used to stay on, and I used to work them. I said, when you get into a game, if you get into a game, you'll be in as good shape, you'll skate now. And we used to go back and forth. Harry just showed me a letter from the arena that I had to stop because I was wearing the ice down on each side. But anyhow, I don't know how they do. I wouldn't want 6 guys hanging around because they all bond together and they all want to play. And this nonsense of being happy when the team wins when you're not playing, that's not the way it is, folks. Because you want to get in the game and you want to play.
Yeah.
All right, who's going to win?
Well, first of all, for everybody for the Canadian division. To me, the question is not who's going to finish first. Who are the 3 teams that aren't going to make the playoffs?
Well, Ottawa. First of all, Ottawa is going to be tougher. Nobody's going to go in and have a good time in Ottawa. You're going to pay the price. If you beat them now, you're going to pay the price. They're going to have a pretty good club, and if they walk in and they get off to a good start, 56 games,
and nobody expects them to win, so there's no pressure.
No pressure. Well, there's pressure on the team. But you will not fool around with Ottawa and have a good time anymore. So imagine the other 2 teams.
So you have the Flames, Oilers, Habs, Sens, Leafs, Canucks, Jets. So 2 of those teams outside Ottawa is not going to.
I'd like to say, and I usually when I was at Coach's Corner, I used to say who's going to win. I don't know. I don't know.
So here you want to know the odds.
Yeah, give me the odds.
The odds. So Toronto's favored to win that Canadian division. Montreal's second.
Oh yeah, well that's Carey Price.
Yeah, so you get 5.
They got tough. Everybody's getting tough now.
Yeah, it's 5-1 that you get. Edmonton's third at 6-1. That's pretty good money.
Yeah, but they got one of the 2 of the best players in the league.
Yeah, but I'm thinking it's 6. You get that's a
good,
pretty good odds.
Yeah,
Calgary's
and they got a good goalie now.
Yeah, Calgary's 6.5. So there are things. So the team, and then Vancouver's 8-1. So they're picking according to the Vegas bettors and on spreads.ca the bettors. Vancouver, Winnipeg, and Ottawa aren't going to make the playoffs.
I don't know Vancouver. And you talk about Vancouver. They got the 2. I think they got the 2 best goaltenders playing on the same team than anybody.
Right, and you look if you're going to bet, you get 8-1 odds.
I'll tell you, boy, you take a flyer. I'd take a flyer on those Canadian teams because I don't think they're the best, though. I think.
So, do you believe that Toronto's going to be number 1 in the Canadian division or whatever you call it?
Well, they'd think so.
Yeah, big. I just, for me, I know, and I'll not saying this because Jared Kiesel likes them, but I look at Calgary because they didn't have a very good year last year. They got a chip on their shoulder. They got that Markstrom from Vancouver. They got the defenseman from Vancouver.
And Markstrom want to prove.
And he's going to want to prove something. And I just think they needed a goalie last year. So, but then again, you look at McDavid. I mean, he's going to be on a tear this year.
The one thing and I know you're on a roll about that, and I'll get back to that. But one thing when you mentioned McDavid, he was not even nominated. Not even nominated. He didn't win, but not even the Masterson Trophy he wasn't even. And he come back from an injury that nobody comes back from, and he come back and play. Well, he wasn't even nominated.
Maybe he'll have a chip on his shoulder.
No, I don't know.
He doesn't play with a chip on his shoulder, though, now, does he?
He got snubbed. I mean, you get snubbed like that, like nobody voted for you, and he
wasn't even nominated.
He was the second. He played less games, and he was the second highest scorer in the league.
I'm not knocking him, but I'm just saying he doesn't seem to play like a guy that has.
Oh, I think he does.
He does. Well, let's hope so, even more.
So, but I don't know. Like you look at that, and you say you got to pick two teams not going to make the playoffs. But I don't think that's the toughest division, though.
No, here's the toughest division. I think. It's Boston, Buffalo, and Buffalo's going to be a lot better, too. They got somebody to play with. They got Stahl.
They got Hall.
And, Taylor Hall.
Yeah.
So Buffalo, Devils, Islanders, Flyers, Pens, Pittsburgh, they call it Penn, and Washington. I think that's the toughest division. I mean, look at those teams. The only team I can see out of the playoffs is Buffalo. Yeah. And they're going to be a lot better, too. Nobody's going to push them around. The second, I think, is the Canadian division. It's the toughest. Calgary Flames, Edmonton Oilers, Montreal, the Sens, Ottawa. And like I said, they're going to be tougher too. Nobody's going to push them around. Canucks and Jets. No, I just did that. Not
in any particular order.
Because if you could pick the two teams out that are going to be out of that division, you're pretty good, and I'm pretty good. I think so. The third is the Hurricanes, Blue Jackets, Wings. Hawks, Panthers, Wild. I think that's the third, and I think the worst. It used to be the Doom to go out west.
Yeah.
But it's Ducks, Coyotes. I think they're the worst. Guys are going to have a.
Well, you think you look at Colorado, St. Louis, Vegas, and then they'll make the playoffs. So then it'll be a race to the bottom after that.
Yeah. So it's going to be tough if you could pick the winners out of them. You're pretty good, and I would like to say I'd like to pick the two teams that are going to be out of the playoffs in the Canadian division. You're going to have to be pretty good to pick them.
Yeah. So when you played in the American League, you used to play a lot of back-to-back games.
Did?
And you said there was always that second game.
Rivalries. And here's another thing too about that. I remember the only place we ever played doubleheaders was in Quebec. Yeah, we used to go up to Quebec, and because we didn't want to travel, it was a long ways up, and we'd play Sunday all the time, and then we'd play Tuesday. Holy smokes, that game Tuesday.
Like you're right. Like let's say Montreal plays Toronto back to back, and let's say Toronto loses that first game. They got to win that second game.
And there's a lot of and everybody this year has got tough. And if you look at the teams, everybody, even the Leafs, are a little tougher. And everybody is tougher. Simmons is good. And,
they got Bogosian, they got Simmons. Thornton, he could still throw around.
Oh, yeah. And Spezza was the only guy that fought.
Yeah, the goon Jason Spezza.
Yeah. So everybody's got tougher. And rivalries are going to be really something to, back-to-back games. Yeah. And look out. I mean, it's going to be good hockey. And every game is a 4-pointer. You lose, as we talked earlier, every game's a 4-pointer. So it's going to be tough going back to the regular season where they float around.
Yeah, with 82 games. So Dad, we'll talk about some more. Like this again, we do this on Sunday. So Wednesday's the first game. We'll kind of get everybody's feel of what's going on, and we'll talk about maybe some of the innovation. They have a new puck. That's $40 $40 a puck. It's all got computer chips in it.
You'd be stealing pucks.
And they don't need to now because there's no fans, so they could just go up and get the puck, right? And
I don't know. I've got to talk about that puck. Next week we'll talk about that puck. Don't tell me the puck's not different. The puck's got to be different.
Right. And then they have this tracking system on the jersey now, so you will be inundated with statistics this year, like how fast the puck is and how it's just going to be crazy. But one thing happened, Dad, that kind of sad in the hockey world. John Muckler passed away, and you and John went way back.
We go back. I played in junior with him in Windsor Spitfires, and then we both got into we both played. I don't think he made the American Hockey League. Pretty tough to make the American Hockey League back in those days. So we used to. I think he went to Eastern League somewhere. And next time I run into him was in. He was coaching Providence, and I was coaching Rochester Americans. And next week we'll talk about the fight because it goes on a long time.
Yeah, we'll tell that story about John. But
I got one more story to tell you about John Muckler. I think he won 6 cups or 4 cups or something.
Yep.
He was assistant coach, and I used to argue with Ron all the time about how everybody in hockey is trying to be an American now. Like, I hate to say it, folks, but people in hockey love Americans, and they try to emulate. How's that? You like that word?
Right.
Emulate.
Right. Like
Great word.
Yep. Like
emulate Americans. Anyhow.
Yeah, like you watched the coverage with TSN. I actually heard one of the guys say when there was a penalty, he said the foul was on.
Yeah, they call fouls and everything. I'll go along with that. I'll talk about this. I'll tell about one.
Yep.
So John came in. He was being interviewed by Ron, and he came in the studio, and I had a running thing with Ron about dangle. Dangle in the old days was a guy could really dangle. That's what they said, could really dangle. That means he could really skate fast. And the Americans, they didn't know what dangle was. I mean, I hate to say it, Americans, you didn't know. And you dangle, it sounds dangle, you dangle something like that. So they made a commercial. They didn't know what they were doing. And in the commercial, I remember, I can see it now, they had a bank guard who didn't know hockey, he's a bank. And they had 2 Europeans come running through the bank, and they were balancing their pucks on their sticks, and they said, and the bank guard said something about, boy, those guys can really dangle. And I said, that's not, dangle means skate fast. So you can argue. And they didn't know. Nobody knows. If you didn't know hockey, you wouldn't know. So John Muckler come in, and he was being interviewed. I said, no, we'll ask him. John, what does it mean when a guy can really dangle? And he looked at me as if I was nuts.
Like you didn't know.
Like I didn't know. Like him and I used to have a running feud. And he said, skate fast. And he almost said, you dummy. And I looked at Ron, and but anyhow. So one of these times I'm going to sit down and show how everybody in hockey and the announcers now all love Americans, and that'll be next week maybe.
Yeah, and then we'll talk about you and John. Well, you were in the American League and between Rochester and Province, and
second worst fight I've ever seen.
Yeah, and you and John almost got into it. So
we'll talk about that.
So again, everybody,
God love him. He died last week. He was 86.
Yeah,
and he played a lot of hockey. I think is he in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he is.
Yeah,
we'll double check.
Okay.